This is Lecture 1, Managing Sport Facilities and History and Future of Sport. When we talk about managing sport facilities, we look in the text when we look at history of sport and the need for facilities. And we see the evolution of facilities in regards to professional stadiums, collegiate stadiums, and Olympic stadiums. And we all know Olympic stadiums originated in Greece, and that's the formation of modern day sport as we know it. Managing sport facilities, when we talk about professional stadiums versus collegiate stadiums, and the growth has been absolutely enormous, mostly on the professional side. Colleges do get new stadiums through revenue building through their universities and a lot of funding. But when we talk about professional stadiums, that's where we see the amount of growth skyrocket. And that's kind of the exciting part. We see that on TV a lot. And some of the newer pieces, newer stadiums that we see in regards to NBA, where the New Jersey Nets have a new stadium in Brooklyn, a new arena in Brooklyn, and then the NFL with the San Francisco 49ers out in Santa Clara. And we see in our text in the second edition that these numbers that we're looking at, when we talk about construction since the 1980s, is rather old material. It was a 2005 survey that was taken and put data in the textbook, and we know how many stadiums and arenas have been built since 2005. Many key marquee arenas, like I just mentioned, with the New Jersey Nets at the NBA and Levi Stadium with the NFL and San Francisco 49ers. So those are the two of the bigger ones, and also the Dallas Cowboys has been since then. So some major growth has occurred on the professional side. And very interesting, a lot of fun facts about those stadiums that we'll get into a little bit more, but neat for us to be able to see and talk about it. Funding for sports facilities. When we talk about how sports facilities evolve from the designing phase all the way through to building, you can do research on any specific stadium. It will show you that there are a lot of different sources for funding to build them. So there's private funding when you have a millionaire, gazillionaire, I'll call him, who wants to fund the building solely out of their own pocket. Most often those are groups of folks that come together to do that. There's also government funding, where the government, whether that's city, state, local government, takes ownership of partial, most often, which would be land rights, where the team would rent from the city or government. And then sometimes you have a combination of both, private and government. And some examples of that, we talked about Levi Stadium briefly. And you'll see, if you do some research on that, and I encourage you to do that, some of the latest research on since 2014 published research shows that it cost originally for Levi Stadium, where the San Francisco 49ers currently play, originally was projected at $937 million. And then by 2014, upon completion of the project, you see the project costs go to $1.31 billion with a B. And you'll see also the stadium funding was split quite differently. And the overall outtake of that by 2014 was 71% of that funding was going to come from Stadium Authority, is what they call it. And basically it's loans from banks, and then the stadium affiliate, which includes seat licenses amongst other income revenue streams. And you'll see the city of Santa Clara also planned to cover costs in there as well. Taxes were invoked, and mostly for hotels near the stadium, where there will be new taxes to cover the costs on that. So they were a little bit tricky on how they did that, not necessarily tax dollars, but they taxed hotel revenue from the area. So there are all different ways to do that, and that's a one example of a way that it worked for San Francisco 49ers and the Levi Stadium project. So when we talk about sports facilities and we take a look back at Beijing in the Olympics 2008, the estimated cost for their facilities was $3.4 billion, and we are aware that Beijing was the highest, let's say, they spent the most amount of money on any Olympics to date, and a lot of it was stadium renovation and stadium builds. And again, estimated cost for those facilities was $3.4 billion. 37 stadiums and arenas were built or renovated. But the key question is the use of facilities after the Olympics. Was it worth it or not? Now, if you know anybody who's traveled to Beijing or has a vested interest in those stadiums or arenas, you will hear that a lot of the arenas are not being used. What you're looking at on the screen is the Aqua Dome. I think they called it the Aqua Dome, which is where the aquatics facilities were. Also something called the Bird's Nest, which was where opening ceremonies were held. And those are relatively unused. No tenant has taken ownership of that. There were rumors of an NBA team coming into China to take ownership of one of their facilities, and that deal didn't go through for one reason or another. But there have been opportunities like that to take some of the existing stadiums and arenas that were built for the Olympics and actually bring revenue back into Beijing to be able to maintain and uphold those facilities. Now we're in 2015, so we're 7 years out from those Olympics, and a lot of those facilities have yet to be used to their full capacity. When we talk about facility management in general, we see people are placed in positions to manage, and those people perform tasks and duties. Those managers wear a lot of hats, and if any of you have been actively involved in sport management in any way, you'll know that that's true. When it comes to planning, marketing, scheduling, building operations, and coordinating with people, those are all very key components into running a facility. And every facility needs a manager or CEO that takes these leads and oftentimes delegates duties down, but ultimately is responsible for the facility management in itself. So when we talk about some of the bigger facilities, like here in Los Angeles, we have the Staples Center, Angel Stadium of Anaheim, StubHub Center that house professional sports teams. Those facility general managers delegate duties down, but they're ultimately responsible for all aspects of operations of the facility. And those managers use their resources wisely. So again, general managers will delegate duties down and supervise different areas, place people in areas of expertise where they're most confident to perform their duties. And that means employees and having mentors in place. A lot of times that means having a master overseer over particular employees so that they have someone to lean on and ask questions, folks who have been in those shoes before. Management teams that would come together collectively. Oftentimes you would find the directors of departments come together for weekly meetings to divulge best practices amongst themselves and what works best for the synergy of the team and for the arena or the stadium. And also boards of directors, managing boards, or committees are very helpful to general managers of facilities that would give an outside look that could possibly help with situations and scenarios and would be almost a sounding board for the general manager to gain insight and help and support also. And these boards are usually made up of high-end executives who have been in the industry or are retired, have been actively involved, Some are wealthy individuals who give back to the community and give back and have a vested interest in the stadium itself. So those key components are really important and critical for a manager to be able to use their resources wisely. When we talk about role players, when we manage a sport facility, you have three key categories. Customers, those also are your promoters of your product, and ticket buyers. Ticket buyers bring in your revenue. Promoters will sell your product, your game, your arena to their friends, family, and those that they know. Very important that you're selling a good product and that you're putting your best foot forward with your customers. They're major role players in your facility succeeding. In addition to that, there are internal constituents that are looked at. Those are your board members, the owners, the employees and co-workers that have a very vested interest in your product, which is your arena, your stadium, sometimes includes the land, sometimes includes the team, and those folks really want to know what's happening and they want to be very involved. External constituents can make or break your stadium. So bankers who invest, and we talk about Levi Stadium where the San Francisco 49ers play. There were relationships with banks, obviously, to be able to pull off a $1.31 billion project. And 71% of that stadium build were on loans from banks and stadium affiliates. Came out to $621 million that came from bank loans and stadium affiliates. So bankers are very key in your facility. Politicians can sell your facility to get paperwork and red tape processed through. And media will also, just like politicians, sell your project. And one example of that happening now, when we talk about a build and we talk about potential, you'll see here in Los Angeles the rumors around the mill about the St. Louis Rams coming to Los Angeles and potentially buying the Hollywood Park site. That's an area where you'll see media taking a big step in. And here in Los Angeles, there's been a lot of newsworthy information out about the St. Louis Rams taking ownership and landing here at the Hollywood site, Hollywood Park site. So those are your external constituents, and internal constituents and your customers all together are very crucial role players for your facility.